Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasting.
Darkcast Network. Come to the dark side of podcasts. We have cookies.
Cookies? We love cookies.
Hey there, Rainbow Warriors. I'm CJ, host of Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBT. My episodes focus on crimes committed by and against the LGBTQ community. I've covered cases you probably have heard of, such as Matthew Shepard, Brandon Tina, and the Orlando Pulse nightclub massacre, as well as some lesser-known cases like the murder of Ray Hainish, the Australian gay beat murders, and the suspicious disappearance of Lisa Lynn Stone. I cover cases brought to me by listeners like Penny Brummer, who I believe was wrongfully convicted, taboo cases such as lesbian corrective rape and murder in South Africa, and Pray the Gay Away camps. I discuss gay serial killers, women who pretend to be men to hook up with other women, and trans murders. I'm opinionated and uncensored. I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea, but surely I'm someone's shot at tequila. No matter what your gender or orientation in life might be, please join me as I tackle rainbow crimes in search of unicorn justice. Remember, it's not a crime to be gay, unless you're a murderer.
Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey, y'all, welcome back
say
to
fuck a lot.
Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Hey, bud, what's up? How you doing?
I'm just hanging out.
Just hanging out.
Reliving my college years.
It's true.
That never happened.
I know. We had an idea the other day that you should go around to some of the Greek houses.
Yeah.
Telling them that you're an upcoming freshman and that you would really like to pledge their fraternity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like old school 2024.
Exactly. And or the other bit could be that you're a 25-year student.
I've been going to school all this time.
Yeah, and you've never graduated, but you've tried every major.
Yeah. And I'm just like a big brother to the incoming freshmen.
And you would be glad to mentor them.
I will mentor you. Yes.
You think that's going to work?
For a small fee.
That's a great shtick.
Yeah, I like it. I wonder how long they let you go along if you just were like, in this day and age of political correctness, not hurting anyone's feelings in any way, how far you could get if you were to go and say, hey, I'm an adult, but, I'm going to finish my college years, much like the show Strangers with Candy. I'm coming back to finish high school, if you will. Some cheesy 80s movie premise.
You don't think they would allow you to do that?
I actually feel you could make
today?
it about 3 weeks before it got up the line far enough to someone with authority.
Well, for those of you who have no idea what we're talking about, we are currently positioned in Chapel Hill next to the University of North Carolina. Go Heels.
Go
Heels.
Heels.
Just beat the pants off Duke.
That's right. Beat them old Dukies.
The Dukies?
Yeah.
You mean like the Blue Devils?
Well, the Blue Dukies.
Yeah.
What I call them.
Well, a Duke fan's going to track you down.
No, I'm just kidding. Well, if it's a
Beat
Duke
you
fan, they know it's one of the biggest rivalries in all of sports, period. And certainly college basketball. And, we're just hanging out here in the old Chapel Hill.
March Madness. It's upon us, Dylan.
We're kicking it in Raleigh. We're checking out Durham. I mean.
I see you. I see you, Bull City.
Yeah, I see you, Bull City.
Right.
Right. So here we are.
All right, bud. We have a very interesting case today. I think it's going to put forth some thoughtful discussions.
I love these ones that, are just not your average true crime story in and out.
And I am going to go out on a limb here, Dylan, and guarantee that no one knows about this case.
Guarantee?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say so.
All right. So let's dive straight in. Now I'm curious.
Joan Little was born and raised in eastern North Carolina in Beaufort County. Now, Dylan, I don't know if it's Beaufort or Beaufort County. I've heard it said both ways.
We'll let the residents of said county decide because they're the ones that really know.
I'm going to go with Beaufort.
Okay.
Due to the spelling, but it might be Beaufort County.
Or Beaufort. I mean, telling how it's said down that way.
The county wraps around the Pamlico Sound, shielded by strips of islands known as the Outer Banks. The area is rural, poor, and entrenched with a long history of racism, particularly at the time of our story. Lumber, shipbuilding, and commercial fishing once thrived in the area, but silt filled the river bottom, closing the docks in Washington, North Carolina, and shrinking the economic base until light manufacturing jobs came to the area in the mid-1960s. During the Civil Rights era, the region saw a huge KKK revival.
Oh, God.
Washington had its own Klansmen, night riders who terrorized black families, and especially those who supported desegregation in the school systems. During the 1960s, members of the black population fled the area for better, safer opportunities elsewhere. As poverty persisted, the African American population dwindled. Joan Little told an interviewer in 1977, quote, "But most of my friends have gone. Young people don't want to hang around there nowadays. Only place they can work is the garment factory, Hamilton Beach, or the yarn place. And they seldom hire young people. There's no real jobs for them there."
The garment place or the yarn factory.
I'm assuming these are textile mills, very common in North Carolina up until about the 90s, right?
Yeah, it's about the same time
got a few hanging on.
A lot of jobs started shipping overseas. Textiles and machining jobs were some of the first to go.
Thanks, NAFTA.
Very easy to move the equipment.
A journalist described the area as, quote, "a county seat with a past but no future." Now, would you want your home to be described, your hometown, to be described in such a way? It sounds very dismal.
No, it sounds the opposite of what you would want your place, your hometown to be. Welcoming, growing in healthy ways, moving into the future. I mean, this sounds like you're describing like a dead-end street.
It sounds like like stunted economy.
Yeah, a dead-end, dark street that there's no reason to go down because it's not going to be good.
As with many southern towns, nearly every aspect of public and private life was ruled by segregation. Railroad tracks served as a dividing line between white and black parts of town. Roads in the black communities remained unpaved dirt roads. A local cafe refused to serve black customers in the white air-conditioned side.
Like you said, the railroad tracks oftentimes was the line through town. You had the black side of town and the white side of town. Now that makes me wonder if the phrase wrong side of the tracks is more about not just being in a bad neighborhood, but maybe during this time would let people know that you're talking about maybe the black part of town.
Possibly. I think it's just more based in social economic status, though.
Oh, okay.
I mean, really, because it's like the poor
Well, that's the way
side
I've
of
always,
town.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
But I think,
You never know where some sayings originate.
Yeah, well, I don't know, Dylan. But thanks for asking me a question I don't know the answer to.
Oh, no, I was just thinking out loud.
All right. So the movie theater had a separate rear entrance for black customers who had to sit in the upstairs balcony. And sadly, I mean, we've heard these stories of what life was like before the civil rights movement. And even after in some places.
Well, it's ridiculous when I hear any descriptions of these times. I mean, we certainly got our own issues nowadays, but when I hear of these times and people being treated like this, people teaching their children that it's okay to treat other humans like this. It just doesn't compute for me. I just don't understand at all why you would ever want to think like that, and how much good stuff you're missing out.
It's so ignorant.
How many good times
And
or friends or opportunities to like really learn and grow and have fun with people you miss out when you view things through this type of lens.
Yes, absolutely, Dylan. Joan's mother, who was deeply religious, forbade her daughter to go to the movies in hopes of shielding her from racism. Joan was the eldest of 9 children born to a struggling family. It was a hard scrabble life, not unfamiliar to scores of others. Joan was born May 8th of 1954, just days before the Supreme Court ruling that segregated schools were unconstitutional. It would be a decade later for the schools in Beaufort County to be integrated. So still a decade later. I mean, that's a pretty long time considering you have the Supreme Court ruling and then we're waiting 10 years before we're going to go along with what is now the law of the land.
Well, sadly, what that in my mind shows is a lack of political will or a political capital that someone can use to push something like this through. It's almost like they don't agree with it either, right? No one's pushing it. No one's trying to move forward quickly to get a resolution so people can do what they need to do. And it's funny when the public thinks one way, but then when it gets pushed through the Supreme Court, they have to go by the letter of the law or the letter of precedent. And they can never find anything. You can't rationale this type of behavior. So obviously it's unconstitutional to treat an American citizen this way. And it's ridiculous it has to go that far to get a proper resolution. And then a resolution will come, and then now you have to implement it. And that's a whole nother ball of wax.
Joan attended the black school as a child. The textbooks were old and no longer in use from the white schools. Joan's mother, Jessie Williams, moved the family to Chocowanity. And I'm probably not saying that.
That's probably not.
I felt like I should have, searched the proper pronunciation before we recorded.
I think people have fun, and certainly they know you don't mean any disrespect to the areas, but people have fun watching you give it a try.
Thanks, Dylan. All I know is like Chowan College is in that area.
Ah.
Okay. Several miles outside of town. So they're living, if it's a rural area, they're moving to an even more like rural part of town.
You're moving into the country from the country.
Yeah, they're not really moving from town. They're moving way out.
Well, and this type of, town will be just a little clump of buildings, a general store, gas station, whatever, some kind of a penny saver store, and that's all you're going to have.
It was too far for the children to walk, so they rode the bus to school. Joan was a solid B student. It wasn't that she didn't like school, but Joan had a lot of problems at home, which I think we now have more understanding of childhood development, and when children do have maybe a rough home life or there are problems at home, it can be a huge distraction.
Well, yeah. Yeah, if they see something happens before they go to school or the night before and they didn't even get to sleep well, parents arguing, someone carrying on, something like that. Or if you're afraid of what you're going to come home to. And I can relate with these types of feelings.
Same.
Being a student. And it's very distracting.
It is very distracting.
Especially if you're under some some intense pressure like a test or finals or anything like that. Some new thing that you're worried about. It can really affect you in an adverse manner.
Joan's mother, Jessie, had gotten pregnant by a man named Willis Williams, who was married to another woman at that time. Joan's parents split up when she was a small child, and her father went to find more opportunities in the urban north. Willis returned frequently to Washington, North Carolina, fathering more children with Jessie. In 1961, Jessie married a man named Arthur Williams, who was no relation to Willis Williams. 4 more children were born, totaling 9 altogether. Joan was 6 years old at the time of the marriage. However, Joan resented her new stepfather. She felt he was not her real father and had no business telling her what to do. Now, Dylan, this seems to be a common complaint for children when a new step-parent comes steps on the scene.
You're not my father.
You're not my real mom. You're not my real dad.
You're not my mom. And so it can be tricky. I mean, they might have feelings about their parents splitting up and all that stuff. And but we've discussed it before. I think a step parent has a very specific type of parenting that they should be ready to bring to the table. It's not full-on parents with all rights. Okay, so if you're coming in expecting that, I don't agree with that. You're going to have to consider what the other parent who's not in the household thinks about their child whenever decisions are to be made. And guess what? Their input counts more than yours.
Well, blended families can be tricky.
But
and you're right.
You do
have sort of a line that you toe when you are the step parent.
You're a step parent. See, that's what you can't forget. You're a step parent. And I know there's people out there.
And working with the biological parents to make the decisions. You know, you should maintain a united front. Sometimes you're not going to agree. But I think everyone should focus on the children's best interests, right?
Don't make it about
ideally.
Yes. Don't make it about yourself. Don't make it about any feelings you might have towards other people. Just try to remain neutral. But you also have a right to be respected and listened to. You know, sometimes that's the tough part is someone, you have a stepchild and there's that instant sometimes friction there because you're the person from outside the house or whatever, however you want to frame it. But they should listen to you and give you respect as well. But you should be respectful. It's tricky, but you just got to know it's a very specific type of parenting.
Jesse worked as a domestic servant, mostly raising white families' children, leaving Joan and the others to be looked after by their illiterate grandmother. Money was tight, the house was crowded, and Joan was forced to share a bed with two sisters. Arthur worked in the logging industry and as a truck driver. He often took seasonal jobs, but didn't always have steady income coming in. Despite being poor, living in the country had its advantages for survival. The family had a garden and a few pigs. The kids shared in chores around the house, tending to the garden and animals. Joan recalled food being served to the youngest children first, so by the time Joan had a turn to eat, there wasn't much left.
Oh, wow.
You know, it's really sad that children experience this kind of food insecurity. But when you are poor and you have a big family, it can be tricky to stretch what food supply you have.
Well, yeah, because at the end of the day, it is, no matter how you feel about it, a finite amount of something, it doesn't matter. It's not going to change. And feeding the youngest first, I mean, I get that sentiment because they're the most vulnerable. But that would make it very hard. That's one sad thing about the pandemic, you know, all the stuff it caused and problems it affected, was one of the first thoughts, even locally in our small little county in North Carolina, western North Carolina, one of the first thoughts when they suspended operations when the pandemic first started was some children, that is their only solid food they can count on.
Oh, the school meal?
Is the school lunches. So they went out of their way to come up with a program where they could still basically deliver, or you could swing by and pick up bagged lunches, which was basically the school lunch for children who are facing food insecurity at home on a daily basis, which really blows my mind in the modern world in any country. I don't think children should be worried about whether or not they're going to eat. I think we have the technology and we have plenty of food surplus. That just shouldn't happen.
If the family had baked, for example, 24 biscuits, Dylan, Joan was lucky to get one. Arthur had a drinking problem too, which further caused Joan to avoid her stepfather. Now, I don't know if this means he was just rowdy or he was a mean drunk or anything like that.
Right.
I don't know the
details.
details.
He drank. She didn't like it.
She just wanted to be away from him. Joan felt Arthur favored his biological children, often doling out harsher punishments to his stepchildren. On one occasion, Joan recalled Arthur holding her brother by his feet and beating him. Joan warned the man to put her brother down, yet she knew her mother would always side with Arthur, her husband. Arthur often complained to Jesse that Joan was disrespectful and lacked discipline.
Well, that sounds way over the top. You got this kid by their feet, holding them up and beating them. That seems way over the top. That's way too much.
Jesse took a job at Hamilton Beach working the night shift, the night shift, Dylan. And this is at an appliance factory.
Working the knife shift.
The knife shift.
You're going to
sorry.
get stuck.
You know me. I'm just an old mush mouth bitch, is what you call me.
Oh, no,
But you know,
no
Hamilton
more.
Beach, I mean, they make a lot of products. I think I've had a Hamilton Beach blender before.
Yeah, they're real.
Toaster.
Yeah, and I think they make quality products. Everything I've ever had Hamilton Beach was a pretty good product.
During this time, Joan began sneaking out and running around the neighborhood, as she described. She would later say, as a young person, Joan didn't understand why her mother couldn't be home. At the time, Joan wanted to just be out of the house. You know, it's very cramped. There's, 11 people living there.
Even a big house, that's a lot of people. And I'm sure
There's
this
never
one.
privacy. She's got all these younger siblings.
And it's all the time. Do something.
Being the oldest, she's
Yes.
tasked with babysitting, looking after the little kids. Her mom's working night shift, so that means all this responsibility is on Joan. She doesn't get along with her stepdad. It just is not like a happy place to be.
It seems like a
for
lot.
for a teenage girl.
Yeah.
At the time, like I said, Joan just wanted to be away from home. She was out, quote, running the streets, hanging out, being with friends, that kind of thing. Jessie was deeply religious, as I mentioned before. And this is interesting, Dylan. She often consulted with a root worker or a conjurer who supposedly cast spells through the use of roots with mystical powers.
Okay, so this would be, a lot of cultures have different versions of this, but this would be no different than seeing a palm reader or someone who does your tarot cards. They're going to basically advise you on the future and kind of tell you what. Would you agree that's kind of what this is?
Working them roots.
Yeah, and tell you allegedly what's going to happen.
It's kind of like hoodoo. Appalachia, we have something kind of similar. We've heard of powwow, which is kind of up north, like in Pennsylvania. But it's like homemade remedies and kind of magic, but without maybe the occult aspect.
Well, it's like one part healer and one part mystic.
Yeah.
Or shaman, if you will.
Oh, our listeners know. We
You
don't
know.
gotta explain.
You
Shit,
know.
You know.
You going down there and get you one of them love potions from the root doctor.
I'm gonna serve you with a love potion.
Baby, I've done been served.
Oh, damn.
I'm intoxicated with your love.
You're toxic sometimes, that's for sure.
Oh, come on.
Oh, you're so cute
I've been
today.
so good. I'm
You're
such a good boy.
You're so cute.
Thanks.
Joan started working in high school a series of low-paying jobs like picking tobacco and waiting tables. Joan was restless and smart. A social worker described the girl as, quote, incredibly intelligent, but with little to engage her in Washington. Quickly, Joan gained a reputation for being a rebellious girl who ran wild, committing pranks, and getting into minor mischief.
Misbehaving.
She's just running around the house with a pickle in her mouth. Misbehaving. You're supposed to sing with me.
Yeah, that was just a general, you're misbehaving. You're acting a fool, as some people would call it.
As your mama would say, you need to get somewhere and get still.
It's true.
One time, Joan and her brothers took her mother's car for a joyride. She climbed onto the car's hood and hurled herself into the back of a moving truck driving ahead of them.
What?
This is the type of prank Joan would engage in.
That's pretty hardcore.
Yes.
The thought of this is one thing I never took part of.
She's like Ariel in Footloose, with the hanging
with the
out
truck,
the window,
the two pickup trucks or whatever, the two cars, and then the semi truck's coming.
Yeah,
and she just pushes it right to the
while
edge.
Sammy Hagar plays. Yes,
but joyrides, something I never ever would take part of or want to do as a young person.
No,
The very thought of commandeering a vehicle and taking off in it with me or a couple buds, it did not sound fun. It sounded scary and sounded like something you get in a lot of trouble for.
it sounds like something that would like to fuck around and find out. I would fuck around and then I would find out when my parents beat my ass.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be a normal whooping.
No, I would have been grounded till the sun died.
You'd still be grounded. I'll still be calling you and talking about, hey, Heather's mom, can she come out and play? And she'd be like, no, she's still grounded.
It's
I'd be like,
true.
but she's over 40.
It's true. Jen would sneak out to meet boys at friends' houses. Scandalous, Dylan. At 15, unable to control Joan's behavior, she was sent to live with an aunt kind of nearby. The aunt turned out to be even stricter than Jessie. Joan continued sneaking out to meet her boyfriend, who was 18 at the time. Jessie felt the boyfriend was too old for Joan. And this, of course, caused problems between the mother and daughter. In 1968, with the help of a Beaufort County judge, Jessie asked that Joan be sent to the Dobbs Training School for Delinquent Girls in Kinston, North Carolina. North Carolina ranked first then in the nation for the number of youths per capita sentenced to juvenile training schools. Race was a dominant factor in placement of these institutions. Conditions at these training schools were deplorable. And we've talked about this time and time again when we discussed Charles Manson. Many of these criminals almost like get their start at these juvenile training schools.
Yeah.
Because it's actually like worse when they go there. They learn to be more. They learn more criminality.
Well, if you're not hard and mean, you're gonna be a victim. So they have to evolve into someone who is, like you said.
And these schools were, they were understaffed. There was no oversight. They often didn't have the funding required.
Right. Employees with questionable motives or past who never get checked, or like you said, no oversight. Sadist.
Physical and sexual abuse was rampant. Joan claimed Dobbs wasn't that bad, but she was disciplined for, quote, talking out loud in the lounge. The punishment was to buff the floors all night on her hands and knees with an army blanket. Joan wasn't having it, so she ran away. She headed north where relatives resided. Joan attended some schools in Newark, New Jersey, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. A thyroid condition brought her back to North Carolina in 1970. And at the time, Dylan, she was within weeks of graduating from Simon Gratz High School in Philadelphia. Afterwards, she returned to New Jersey briefly to work a manufacturing job. But transportation problems and low pay led Joan to return back to North Carolina. So when she moved from Philadelphia to North Carolina, the North Carolina school refused to acknowledge her credits. And though she was weeks away from graduation, they were going to make her like repeat the whole, like her whole senior year.
Okay.
So she just dropped out.
She's like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as a young person especially, that would be very disappointing to be told, even though you've been basically a solid B student through most of high school or whatever is great. I think that's really good, And be told that all that works means nothing and you got to repeat it all. I mean,
and
that's
I also
ridiculous.
wonder how much race played into that. Like if they were just giving her a difficult time and unwilling to take these transfer credits or, adapt, her credits to a diploma just based on the fact that she was a black student.
Well, you'd always have to consider that element during this time period. But I will say that is one of the arguments for the proponents of standardized testing and standardized curriculum is this very thing, that if you move from a whole nother state, another region of the country, that you would be basically you'd be at the same skill level, no matter who you are or where you move to. So that could possibly played into it. But let's be honest, back then, they're probably just giving the young black girl, the black family, a hard time.
By the time she was 18, Joan was living on her own. She found a small rental house in Washington. She drifted in and out of menial, low-paying jobs and spent her time in pool halls. She met Julius Rogers, a man twice her age. He ran a local juke joint where music was loud and whiskey was cheap. Julius was also a hard drinker. Julius taught Joan to hang drywall, and the pair worked odd jobs throughout the Piedmont and eastern North Carolina, where she reportedly made good money. She was making about $5 an hour.
Okay.
Which in the 1970s, it was pretty decent money.
Yeah, well, who's to say the minimum wage is probably under $2, I'm going to guess.
Yeah, I think so. Joan had a few run-ins with law enforcement for shoplifting, and once she had a sawed-off shotgun in her vehicle and gets in trouble for that.
Yeah, and that is one type of weapon that you never want to get caught with, because you've literally sawed it off, made it more dangerous, and that's very illegal. Even to this day, that's a very illegal thing to do.
The charge was dismissed. She pled guilty to stealing earrings from a Woolworth store and was given 6 months of probation, a suspended sentence. However, Black residents accused Joan and Julius of running a theft ring. Yet Joan's real legal troubles began in January of 1974 when she was arrested alongside her younger brother, Joan Little. They were charged with 3 felony counts for breaking into Black-owned trailer homes and stealing property valued at $1,300. Both pleaded not guilty. Jerome agreed to testify against his sister for a reduced charge. He said that Joan and Julius were actually responsible for the break-ins and were the thieves.
Oh.
Jerome alleged that Joan had stashed stolen goods in his trailer and at Julius's club, and he had no idea how they had gotten there. Joan eventually, just giving into this pressure, confesses. Some thought it was an attempt to protect her boyfriend, Julius Rogers.
So the Black community's suspicions were correct, it sounds like?
Yes.
Possibly?
Yes. Joan was found guilty and received 2 7 to 10-year prison sentences. The judge suspended the second sentence, which was consecutive and not concurrent, in lieu of 5 years probation. He ordered Joan to have no contact with Julius Rogers unless the two were married, and that she had to be gainfully employed. She was also banned from hanging out at Rogers' club and its vicinity for 5 years. The sentence was incredibly stiff for a first-time offender.
That seems pretty rough. I mean, I think that you should not take people's stuff. I hate a damn thief. Almost worse than anything besides.
I hate a thief, too.
Well, I just hate a thief.
It's so shitty.
It's so shitty. And it's not your stuff. And it's just such a cowardly thing to do. Well, hide around and wait for someone to take their stuff.
Well, it's not a victimless crime.
No, and
and people, especially, you have to imagine, like, Joan, she's stealing from her peers who are probably just like her, working poor.
Right.
People that the few little, little bit of items that they have, they've worked very hard to obtain these items. And they're not easily replaced. I mean, when you're working poor and you're barely getting by, living paycheck to paycheck, you don't have money to replace items. You want to take care of what you've got because you just don't have money to go around replacing that stuff. And it's one thing if, let's say, your stereo breaks, but it's another when somebody breaks in your house and steals your shit.
Your stuff that you work so hard. And that doesn't mean that people who have more means or better finances deserve to be robbed. That doesn't
Not at
mean
all,
that.
but I'm just saying,
but
if you're stealing from your own people, your own community, people who are your neighbors.
Right.
That don't really have the money to replace. I mean, I don't know. To me, that just seems almost worse.
Well, no, but that certainly does seem to make it it makes it harder to recover. That doesn't make it better or any of that, but certainly makes it harder to recover. You don't have insurance. You don't have savings that you can get and then turn in on the insurance or hope they find. I mean, you're kind of screwed, and it takes you longer to recover. And she should know better because she has lived, come up kind of poor too.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
And some people say poverty breeds this type of behavior and stuff like that. But I agree with Heather. You should know better because you should
learn from your own experience.
Right. You would know how bad it would harm you or your family if someone come in and took what few valuables you had.
Law enforcement had their eye on Joan, and the theft charges were likely to take down her boyfriend because it seems like they were really maybe after Julius Rogers. Like he was kind of a known criminal. Police kept trying to catch him and, in these crimes he was committing, but never could get at him.
Well, Joan's always there.
So they maybe thought, well, if we get the girlfriend, she will give him up.
for maybe a reduced sentence or something like
But
that.
she didn't. She's a ride or die.
But that's not okay for them to give her. The only reason she should get that harsh sentence is if her crime merits it, right? It shouldn't be some kind of pawn in some game you're playing to put pressure on her or something. That's totally inappropriate, and I don't agree with that at all. We know of serial murderer, molesters, and rapists that get a shorter sentence than Joan got in that first offense.
Well, again, I think it just speaks to the time period and how racial politics played out in this small town.
I agree.
It was long thought that Julius Rogers ran a prostitution ring out of his bar and at Camp Lejeune, the Marine base near Jacksonville. Joan would later admit that some of her friends did work as sex workers and prostitutes, but she denies ever doing so. She says she knew people, but she wasn't involved at all. Unable to make the bond, which was $15,000, on June 6th of 1974, Joan was locked up in the Beaufort County Jail. Joan requested to be held in the local jail rather than being transferred to the Correctional Center for Women in Raleigh, North Carolina. She wanted to stay home in order to work on her bond. Like, she felt like if she was close to home, she would be able to speak to her family, her friends, and maybe have a chance of getting a bond reduction or somehow raising the money she needed to get out of jail.
Right. And that sounds like a pretty big bond at that time as well.
Yes.
15,000. I mean, I don't know if it's secured. Obviously, it's secured, not unsecured, or she could, literally sign herself out. So let's say it's $15,000 secured bond in the early 70s. That seems like a lot, right? I don't think it matches her crimes, if you will.
The jail had a video system for keeping inmates under observation, which left Joan with little privacy. Now, Dylan, from my understanding, this Beaufort County Jail did not have like a separate area for female inmates. So they kind of had to make do.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's not good.
She had a wash basin and a toilet in a cell, but there was a video camera that kept her constantly exposed. So she never had privacy when it came to, using the bathroom, washing her face, changing clothes.
And that sucks, but I don't know, I'm no expert, but from what I know about jail or been told, you're not going to get much privacy no matter who you are. You might have that one little spot in your cell or something like that, but I think that's common maybe for a lot of prisoners.
Yeah,
but here we have, sounds like a woman being kept in a men's facility.
Yes.
Correct?
And there are not really...
There's
not female staff.
Okay.
To tend to her. I think during the day they might have had a female employee, but she wasn't there in the evenings.
No.
It's just a recipe for a bad situation, and that's what we're going to get into.
Now, but she requested to stay instead of going to the women's facility. Is that right? So she could work on her bond. So I understand why Joan made that request, because certainly that could improve her situation, at least being bonded out till court or the trial or any of that, because that can take forever. But unfortunately, and I'm surprised they're even doing that. I'm surprised they didn't say, look, this isn't a women's facility, so we can't do that. We're going to have to send you over to Raleigh.
Well, they did often have, they would have female inmates who were picked up on, like petty charges that might be kept there for a day or two.
But they didn't make any attempts to improve facilities or make it safer for everyone involved, right?
Right.
They just kind of stick you in there.
And I also want to give a bit of a trigger warning as we continue with our story. There will be depictions of sexual assault. And I know that is very triggering for some folks. If that's something you don't want to hear, you probably don't want to listen to the rest of our episode, because we will be discussing it here and there, just to let you know.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate if you have been through something like that, and we totally understand, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Okay, Dylan. So in the last week of Joan's incarceration at the Beaufort County Jail, the camera was broken and sent for repairs. Joan had been issued 2 sheets when she had first arrived, and she hung one of the sheets across the bars to block out the camera in order to have a little bit of privacy.
Well, yeah.
The second she was taken from her,
Because she tried to use it to get some privacy.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're going to say, well, that's the reason we have the cameras. We got to keep eyes on it all the time, blah, 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 whatever.
She had to call a guard to turn on water when she wanted to take a shower. There was no curtain, and the video system covered this small shower area as well.
Yeah, that seems overly obtrusive.
Intrusive.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
That seems overly intrusive.
I don't know why this obtrusive is like one of your
I don't
favorite like non-words.
I don't know, but it makes me feel obtuse as well. But so that seems inappropriate, I guess is what I'm saying. This seems like it goes beyond.
It is inappropriate.
Yeah, this is
because
not
they're
okay.
They're going to have video footage of this nude woman showering. Her privacy is totally violated.
I'm pretty sure they don't film male inmates in facilities showering.
No.
But so she's in this makeshift, all-inclusive cell, if you will. So therefore, that's why her shower and everything's taking place in her cell. Is that correct? Would you guess?
Yeah.
It sounds DIY, kind of thrown together.
Well, exactly, and that's why I mentioned like this is not like a real women's holding cell or like a women's area.
No.
Like, this is not a women's block in the jail.
No.
It's like some makeshift sort of cell that's upstairs in the jail. And the camera's right on the cell, and they see everything that you're doing. There's never a minute of privacy.
So, even though you're in jail, and it's not going to be fun, right? You would expect that. She has this is clarifying for myself. She has way less privacy than the other inmates are allowed.
Yes.
As far as using the bathroom, possibly, certainly showering. They go back into shower stalls and somewhere like that.
And they don't have security cameras in the bathrooms
pointing straight at them. No, that's not. That's wrong. I mean, that's to this day. That would never be okay. And yeah, okay. So she's just not in a good environment.
The night jailer was a 62-year-old man named Clarence Alligood, a former farmer and truck driver. He was about 5'8" and weighed around 200 pounds. Now, the Alligoods are one of the oldest families in Beaufort County. Mrs. A.K. Alligood, no relation, was interviewed at the Goodyear Tire Garage about Clarence. She said she didn't know him, but heard his neighbors often spoke highly of him. She said, quote, "The Alligoods are good folks, but poor folks."
See, this shows in a small little tiny town. And this is the second time you've said no relation as far as someone having the same last name. That just goes to show you how long these families have been entrenched in this area. Long enough that you've had branches of family that are unconnected, or at least they don't know. They're likely connected 4 or 5 cousins ago or something like that at some point. But they, in their day, they don't know of them at all. And that's where you get the sayings that we always laugh about, where you got the good so-and-sos and the bad ones, because you'll have one branch of the family be kind of successful and normal, and then you'll have a branch that's just a nest of shitbirds.
That does happen sometimes.
That does happen sometimes.
Well, another neighbor said of Clarence, quote, "The man had an eye for women." At the time, Alligood was earning $6,000 a year, working this jail job. And he had only been this night jailer for about 18 months. Sheriff Otis Red Davis, so he goes by Red, who had spent 29 years working in law enforcement, said that Alligood was, quote, "the most security-minded man we ever had back there." Yet another man who managed a bottling company in town was surprised that Clarence was able to hold down the job at the jail. He also added that Clarence Alligood had a racial bias and said, quote, he didn't like coloreds that much.
Oh.
Probably not a good attitude if you're working a public service job like being a jailer.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's not a good attitude for any job. I'm going to think it doesn't improve unless you're going for like Grand Dragon of like the Ku Klux Klan or something.
Well, yes, but especially when you're in a job where taxpayers,
yes,
or those people that you don't like are paying your salary.
Paying some of your salary, yes. That makes it way worse.
Yet, in the 81 days that Joan was locked up in the Beaufort County Jail, Clarence Alligood was known to bring Joan sandwiches late at night and allowed her to use the phone in his office at odd hours. In the early morning hours of August 27th, 1974, jail officials found Clarence Alligood slumped on a cot in the women's section of the Beaufort County Jail. His lifeless body bore 11 stab wounds, including 10 in his chest and 1 in the head. Naked from the waist down except for a pair of brown socks. An ice pick dangled loosely from his right hand. His shoes were found in the corridor outside the cell, but his socks were on his feet again. Otherwise, Alligood was naked from the waist down, as I mentioned. So just wearing his socks. You know, I'm sorry, fellas. Never really a good look for you. I don't care how hot you are.
She does not like a man with just socks on.
Don't be naked in socks. Please don't.
What is it about it that throws you so much? 'Cause
I don't know. There's
I've
just
tried.
something about it that grosses me out.
Sometimes
Especially it's like white sock, like
okay.
or black. I don't know.
The athletic sock up to your knee?
Yes.
Okay. But
Just please don't.
sometimes my feet have been cold in the past, and I don't want to wear socks to bed. You know, it's just a temporary thing. You're not having it. If one of those socked feet touch you under the cover, you just can't do it.
Okay, but you're forgetting the part about if you're cold, you should wear pajamas, Dylan.
Oh no, I'm going to be naked, just
Where
socks.
are your jammies?
My feet's cold. Everything else is toasty warm.
Ugh. That sort of grosses me out a little bit.
Yeah, and a little moist.
Stop! Ew.
Yes.
Yuck. I think I just threw up in my mouth.
Oh my God.
I think our listeners did too.
No, I'm sorry about that. If anyone threw it in their mouth just a little
Well, I'm
bit.
just like, if you're cold, put on clothes, bud.
Yeah, with just my feet.
Well, that's the thing, though. When you're naked wearing socks, just no, don't do it, okay? If you had on your pajamas and socks, that's one thing.
Oh.
But when you're naked, and we all know from Jerry Seinfeld, you're always bad naked.
Naked.
There's not a good naked.
There's bad naked.
When you got on socks.
Like coughing or sneezing is bad naked.
Yeah, or bending over
Bending
to pick
over.
something up. Yes.
Well-
Squatting. It's not a good time to work on your lunges. If you're a downward dog.
Ooh, I don't want you to see any of that.
Yeah. Let me examine you.
Well, I'm wearing just socks later. Let's keep it going.
Okay, please don't. I'm leaving. He was also wearing an open shirt and an undershirt. A nightgown was found on the floor. Hanging on the cell door was a brassiere and a night jacket, which I'm assuming is like a bathrobe. But the term night jacket kind of got me. Seminal fluid was on Alligood's thigh, and the fluid contained sperma. It contained sperm. Okay.
Okay.
Instead of the spermatozoa, I'm not going to go with the official.
Okay. So it was similar.
He had
it was,
semen on his thigh.
It was yeah. You know what it is.
However, the medical examiner pointed out the release of seminal fluid quite commonly occurs at the time of death and was not necessarily related to the crime or the case.
Okay. Well, you have pointed out that there is a release of everything from a body, basically. And I never considered seminal fluid being released either, or being released as well. So I've actually never thought of it.
I did not know.
Right.
But this is also 70s science, which is a little different from 2024 science.
No, but I mean, if everything's just kind of emptying out, I mean, it's not beyond the realm of possibility in my mind.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't know about this, and I'm not going to say what I was going to say.
So you don't think it does happen?
I don't know. I didn't look into the science. Let's move along. Beaufort County didn't contact the State Bureau of Investigation until 8 hours after finding Alligood's body. By then, the cell had been cleaned up and officers had removed some evidence, which made interpretation of the case difficult to make. The evidence collected by the SBI did not include Alligood's pants or his undershorts.
Well, this is completely wrong procedure. I mean, you've had one of your own killed, a county worker, if you will, and you know you're going to reach out to the SBI or the GBI or whatever state you're in, the state police.
Well, in North Carolina, it's the SBI.
What's the SBI? Yeah, and
the GBI.
GBI would be Georgia,
Well,
but
honey, I know. I'm just
anywho.
saying. What?
Well, you know you're going to reach out because you're going to want to have a third party investigated because it's one of your own, if you will. So in the name of transparency and objectivity, you're going to want outside help. You're going to want access to the resources. There's just no good reason to wait to call them. in my opinion. And I don't know who told them they could go in there and mess with the scene. But that's completely inappropriate. And as far as, even if you do think you know what happened and know who did it, you're screwing up the crime scene and you're going to screw up the court case. Or you could. So, I mean, it's like they're doing all the wrong things.
Joan was missing from the scene. The only female inmate at Beaufort County Jail had taken off after Oligood's murder. After 8 days on the run spent hiding in a 2-room cabin, Joan turned herself in to the SBI in Raleigh, North Carolina. She had actually had a friend smuggle her out of Washington and bring her to the Chapel Hill area.
So she came to the state capitol, right?
Yes.
She came to the state capitol. She wants to turn herself into people outside of that area.
Yes.
It sounds like.
Yes. Little's attorneys told the SBI that Joan had resisted a sexual assault by the jailer and fled in fear. Joan claimed she did not kill Oligood. The state medical examiner told newspapers that the autopsy did not produce conclusive evidence of sexual activity at the time of Oligood's death. Dr. Hoffman, the medical examiner, added that the medical reports could not be completed without the missing clothing items.
Well, yeah, you're going to need the victim's clothing.
Karen Galloway, one of Joan's attorneys, told reporters that the medical examiners couldn't do their job without receiving the underwear and trousers. Dr. Hoffman admitted the body had been turned over to the state medical examiner's office wearing only socks, a shirt, an undershirt, and jewelry. Chief Deputy Red Davis from the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office said the missing clothing was turned over to the state medical examiner's office, but he believed the SBI had confiscated the clothing as evidence. Yet the SBI director, Charles Dunn, didn't know if the SBI had possession of the pants. Normally, he told reporters, items would not be taken until after the medical examiner had seen them. Davis also insisted the cell wasn't cleaned and photographs were taken of the crime scene, that it was only cleaned up after the coroner came and removed the body and gave them the green light.
Okay. So basically, he's saying they're lying.
Yes. So someone's lying.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the SBI is going to come in and just start lying. I mean, that makes sense.
Medical examiners filed an official request for the missing evidence. When Joan was on the run, the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office only released a few details in the murder. They omitted any information relating to sex being involved. The information released only seemed to inflame public relations against Joan. Locals accused Joan of being a prostitute. One man said, quote, "Hell to them black people. Fucking is like saying good morning or having a Pepsi Cola."
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Let me find out them black folks is getting down.
He's just jealous.
He's jelly.
Part of the stipulation for turning herself in was that she would no longer be held in the Beaufort County Jail. Little was taken to the women's prison in Raleigh. When she escaped from jail, law enforcement wanted to have Joan declared as, quote, an outlaw, which I guess maybe they used that term instead of fugitive at the time.
Okay.
Which meant they could shoot her on sight. Joan said, quote, "They came looking for me with high-powered rifles. If they don't want to harm me, why did they come after a woman with high-powered rifles?" However, this request was denied. Deputy Sheriff Davis said he did not believe his deputies would have harmed Joan Little.
We just wanted the outlaw, her to be called an outlaw just to make us feel better. No, they wanted to legally murder her.
Yes, they did.
As soon as they got that designation on her, they were going to come up with some scenario. They were going to track her down, and oops, we had to shoot her.
Yep.
Boom. And
Yep.
that's like some Old West shit, bro.
It's shady as hell.
And
this was not uncommon during this time period in the Jim Crow South.
The local authorities are mishandling this entire investigation.
You think?
I mean, it's beyond mishandling.
No, this is a story that will infuriate you to your core.
This is an intentional cover-up.
Another reason why I felt we needed to discuss this case. It's important. Attorneys from Durham took on Joan's case pro bono. However, the team did request funds from the state to pay for expert witnesses such as criminologists. They also filed for a change of venue. A grand jury indicted Joan Little for first-degree murder on September 11th, 1974. If convicted, Joan faced a mandatory death sentence. At the time, North Carolina had over 60 death row inmates, the most of any state in the U.S.
Mandatory death sentence. I don't think I've ever heard that one.
This was kind of before that Supreme Court ruling.
Right, but still,
Yeah.
I mean, that's, if it's applied to all the guilty all the time, I'm down for it. But you know how that goes.
Judge Joshua S. James ruled the trial would be held in Beaufort County. The jurors, he said, could be drawn from outside the 2nd Judicial District, which included Beaufort, Martin, Hyde, Washington, and Tyrrell counties. He also denied the defense's request for $4,300 to hire a criminologist to aid in the defense. The judge also denied a request for the defense to have access to the evidence, including Alligood's clothing, like the pants and underwear. Sounds totally legal, right?
I don't understand how he can even rule that.
I thought the defense was always allowed to have access to the evidence.
Yeah, you have a constitutional right to all the evidence brought against you to go over it, which is
Dylan,
AKA discovery.
this is some shady backwoods fucking dumbass shit, bro.
And just regular Joe and Jill Sixpack here at Mountain Murders knows that this is way off of law. This is wrong. You're trampling on civil rights, constitutional rights. And like the journalists of the day should have been having a field day with this type of open air corruption. I mean, this is what this is: public corruption, out in the public.
No, it's a lot, Dylan. I mean, I don't know. I don't know nothing about lawyering, but I know that this is some bullshit.
Yes.
Okay.
It is some bullshit.
Some bullshit, bud. So black ministers began taking up Joan's case. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference held a black summit with their first priority being Joan's story. They wanted to talk about Joan's case. Reginald Frazier, a black attorney from New Bern, asked the U.S. Attorney General William B. Saxby to order an investigation of alleged abuse of women in North Carolina jails. He said there was evidence that hundreds of women, both black and white, had been subjected to illegal and immoral assaults by jail trustees while confined. He asked that cases of incarcerated women dating back to 1954 be examined to determine whether these women had engaged in sexual relations with jail staff. Some thought it appeared to be a simple case of murder, yet Alligood's unusual dress left them with questions.
Well, yeah. Like, how did you end up half naked? Did someone do this to your body after death? I mean, this is it's almost the opposite of like the signs of a victim being sexually assaulted. We'll oftentimes have a description of no clothes removed from the waist down, bra, shirt pushed up above, up around their neck and all this mess. And this is almost like the opposite. It's like almost proves that he was up to no good, if you will. You know what I'm saying?
You think?
It's kind of weird.
I mean, it's such a stretch.
It's such a stretch that in this sexist, racist jail, this woman was going to be raped. Y'all know it's crazy, right?
It was learned that Alligood kept the ice pick in his desk drawer, which sounds like a bad idea to me. An easily accessible, unsecured weapon, just in the desk.
Why?
I mean,
is he having this much, high dollar liquor on ice or something? What's he need his ice pick for? I mean, for real.
I know. I'm like, is this an issued weapon?
Yeah. I mean, is it something he's recovered off of?
So if you're a jailer, you just get to bring your own weapons. Like, hey, I've got this really cool samurai sword I bought down at the flea market. I'm going to bring it into my office and hang it on the wall.
And how does that get from his desk drawer to her cell
Into his hand.
in his hand. It's almost like he took it and he used it to possibly threaten her life.
You think?
If she didn't consent to sexual relation. Oh, no, it's a stretch.
No.
It's a stretch.
He's a good man.
He's a good man.
They're poor, but they're good.
Them olive, was it all goods?
All good.
All good. No offense to the all good family of 2024.
Joan's case raised questions about what really went on in small town jails. Quickly, activists latched on to Joan's case. And we're talking like feminist groups, Dylan, the National Organization for Women, the Black Panther Party. People were really, when these activist groups heard of Joan's story, they were enraged at this woman's treatment. Larry Little from Winston-Salem, and he's not related to Joan either. Larry Little from Winston-Salem was the Black Panthers' director of political affairs. He coordinated a statewide defense committee for Joan Little. He organized rallies and parades. The Panthers printed fact sheets with the medical examiner's report, which he dispersed at events.
I like that.
I do too. Activists were asking, quote, can a black woman defend herself against a white man, and can a black woman get a fair trial?
And I think those are fair questions given the time and the climate that existed back then.
Now, Reginald Frazier, he is the black attorney from New Bern who is asking the U.S. Attorney General to investigate the jails in North Carolina.
He's asking them to go over a lot of different cases.
Yes. Right? Now, he conducted a survey of 6,000 white Eastern North Carolina residents. 80% responded that women should be able to defend themselves against an attacker, like in the jail circumstance.
Did you say 80%?
Yes.
So 20% disagree with that sentiment?
Yes.
That's hard to believe.
However, when he asked if a black woman should be able to defend herself against a white man, nearly 90% disagreed.
Jesus.
There were clear racial issues in Beaufort County and in Eastern North Carolina. Joan told the press, quote, before I went to prison, I had faith in the court system. But when they indicted me, I realized they can do anything they want to you. They will do anything they want to you.
So here you have this woman. She was doing some criminal stuff. She got caught up and got this in my opinion, a rather harsh sentence for a first time offender. So that would strike you and make you feel like the system doesn't work. It's broken. It's unfair. And then, so while she's trying to figure that out, according to her, allegedly, she's attacked and assaulted by one of the guards.
Yes.
And she protected herself in self-defense. And once that happened, she was afraid, probably in the back of her mind, thinking she won't get a fair shake. Nobody's going to believe my version of the story. And then she runs. And then after that survey you just read, 90%, because you said a black woman against a black man.
A white man.
Or I'm sorry, a black woman protecting herself against a white man from a white man. 90% of 6,000 is a pretty fair. That's a pretty big sampling of the population. She's right, and her fear that they're not going to believe my story, and that's why I run. So I mean, this is all it's backing up her version of what's happening.
Larry Little told supporters at rallies, quote, Joan Little could be your sister, daughter, niece, or mama. She could be you if you were a black woman. The reality of the situation is that if Joan Little were white, she would have never been indicted in the first place. Which I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I'm not saying that white women weren't treated differently, but I think as a whole, women were treated as second-class citizens. And as I was doing research on Joan's case, there were multiple other cases of women, white women as well, who had fought off attackers, killed them, and or killed someone who raped them like after the fact.
Yeah.
And they were given harsh sentences and they were not treated very well either. So I think, yes, there were racial issues, but I think women as a whole were just treated like shit during this time.
No, I think it's true. And I mean, being treated.
Especially, again, if it was something against a man,
right,
they're always going to rule in a man's favor. Always.
Yeah, being treated a little less shitty is not that.
It's still being treated shitty.
It's not that great of a point to make, in my opinion. And I honestly think that they've used, because women, you're half the population. Let's just talk about from America for a minute. Half the population, basically. So that's a big chunk. You certainly got big part of the market share as far as input, and you should be having like basically even say in society, wouldn't you say, at least on matters? But then they've used the racial thing and the racial lines to like create these rifts amongst women themselves.
Yes.
It's like, oh, white women don't, and I'm not saying that white woman understands exactly what a black woman goes through. Guess what? A black woman doesn't understand exactly what a white woman deals with, because you have different small things that are different. But as women in general, I think that
as a whole, you deal with a lot of the same.
You deal with the same
problems.
shit.
You do.
You deal with the same shit, and you should never let people come in and fracture your group with these things like race
they
or
fracture
age
it to keep us from uniting.
Yeah, well, we know why they're doing it.
Because if we unite, if women come together, we unite, we begin supporting each other, we don't allow this bullshit, they know they would be in trouble.
Right. Well, it's no different than the 1% versus the 99%. It's the same. It's the same theory.
So First and Freedom is the biggest lie they've ever told in North Carolina, according to Larry Little. As supporters and activists rallied around Joan's case, others wanted to take advantage of her. A Washington, North Carolina man named Golden Franks began...
What?
That's his name, bud.
Golden Franks?
Franks.
With an E?
I.
Franks. Like Brinks, but Franks.
Franks. Yes, Golden Franks.
What the hell, dude?
Golden Franks began raising money for Joan Little's defense fund, yet Joan never saw any of that money. The Southern Poverty Law Center was using Joan's name to fundraise, even bringing in $140,000 in a single month. But Joan didn't get a dime of this. So they're using her name and her case to raise money, but they're not offering her any financial assistance.
I got to say, that I'm sure they've done some good, but I've heard something along these lines about the Southern Poverty Law Center. Is that it?
Yeah.
In the modern day.
I'm just not even sure what they do.
I'm not sure. Well,
because it doesn't seem like they really do anything.
Well, they got watch lists. They put out watch lists of groups. But no, it's one of those things. And you see this in philanthropy or a charity. You'll see this stuff. People raise a ton of money for a cause. And when people give, or the public sees, hey, we raised $50 million, to help that country or those people. And, like 10 cents of every dollar might make it to the ground wherever it's actually supposed to help.
Because it makes its way up top to the administrative, to the executive director.
Well, they say not for profit, Heather. Not for nonprofit.
Like the Susan G. Komen Foundation, which is for breast cancer research.
Right.
They're one of the worst. They spend like more money on advertising
and fundraising
than they actually do helping
on research.
Yes.
Or
supporting, like free mammograms and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And beware if
Wounded Warriors is another. That's the money doesn't really make it to veterans. There are there are certain places that I'm like, I'm not giving them my money. And if I want to help veterans, I will find a local chapter of a group or something.
Right. Or do something
that
physical.
I know is actually helping than to donate to one of these big nonprofits.
No,
because in the end, they don't really do shit. Not what you'd think they should be doing.
They call it a nonprofit, but that certainly doesn't mean there aren't people profiting off of it. And just beware. And I've given, and I think I've given before. I've donated to certain things, things I believe in. And I think volunteering physical time is very important if you can do that on a local level, because that's where they really need, hands on, boots on the ground. But you can research. And before you give to any group for any cause, you can research, just a little bit of research, and you can find out how many percent of that dollar actually makes it to who you're trying to help. And the Good Samaritans Fund, I think run by Billy Graham's son, maybe, is one of the ones that have the best record on getting the biggest percentage to the ground, to the people who need the help. So you got to take a look at that, because some of these, man, it's as little as a nickel or a dime out of every dollar.
And that's disgusting.
That's not right. That's not how that's supposed to be fun. And I know you got to have infrastructure, and you got to have a way to implement, get the stuff there, and trucks to move stuff. There's cost involved in these things, but that's just that's robbery. That's being fake and being a little bitch.
Well, there were even some talks of lawsuits between Golden Franks and the Southern Poverty Law Center. In Anywho.
So she didn't receive, so in this case, it was 100%. Sounds like.
Not going to Joan.
And that's a lot of money raised in a month.
So that's what's so disgusting is these people are using her case. They are using her pain, her tragedy.
And the public's outrage.
To profit. But yet they're not willing to give any of that money to help her. I mean, what the fuck? Anywho, I'm going to get off my soapbox.
That's not right, though.
The defense team began saying that Joan Little had murdered Alligood in self-defense. The prosecutors contended that Joan had stolen the ice pick, lured Alligood to her cell to seduce, then kill him, and that the murder was premeditated.
So she stole the ice pick out of his drawer office.
Yes.
And she lured him back.
Yes.
With her feminine wiles.
Yes.
Because you got to be careful. That shit works. No man can resist it. And
except for like the gay guys, maybe.
Well, yeah, but
I mean,
that goes without saying. So James, you're safe
from my feminine,
from Heather's feminine wiles.
I know I'm pretty masculine, so
That's true. She does have BDE,
so the gay men do love
you
me.
You may not be safe, James.
Yeah,
but then she held him at ice pick point. Okay, once they got in the cell.
Okay, what
and
I want to
made him
know
take
is
half his clothes off.
How she was able to like ninja her way out of a locked cell to steal the ice pick
under 24/7 surveillance of a camera.
If Alligood didn't let her out of the cell,
right?
Yeah.
Well, she seduced him into letting her out of the cell and going to his office to get the ice pick. Brings him back to he still doesn't know what's happening.
She held the ice pick in her prison pocket.
Yes.
So he wouldn't know.
Yes.
Man, this is elaborate. She's like a criminal mastermind.
So and then
if she's this much of a criminal mastermind, it seems that she wouldn't be in jail in the first place. She would have never been caught, right?
Then she made him undress the lower half of his body.
She forced him at ice pick point.
Yes, at ice pick point, and forced him to ejaculate onto his own thigh.
Yeah.
And then she started stabbing him.
Yeah.
Because her plan.
She was like, you take off everything but your socks.
Yeah. Leave them
It's
socks.
the ultimate humiliation. You're going to leave those socks on because it's so gross to see a naked man in socks. You leave those damn socks on, you son of a bitch.
This is the prosecution's story.
Yeah. Okay. There's more. Wait, there's more. We're going to talk about these prosecutors. Now, privately, key law enforcement officials in Beaufort County confided that they knew Alligood was having a sexual relationship with Joan, including the night before the murder. They noted Alligood had voluntarily gone into Joan's cell. One officer said, quote, "Nobody bumped him on the head and dragged him in there." At the pretrial hearing, the defense raised issues with what they called a defective jury. It was all white, hardly a jury of Joan's peers. They said blacks were not allowed to serve on the jury in Beaufort County. The clerk of court stated that the jury summons were culled from property tax rolls and voter registration. There were 12,695 registered white voters in the county and only 2,960 registered black voters.
So this is in the mid-70s at this point.
Yes.
And they're talking about blacks aren't allowed to serve on the jury in any capacity.
Yes. And
what the fuck?
And the defense attorney showed that poor and black people were being excluded from jury duty.
Not only black people.
But poor people.
So it also had an affluence or a socioeconomical element as well.
Yeah.
Because you don't want someone who can sympathize with the defendant, do you? You never have that.
Finally, Joan was given a change of venue for the trial. The prosecution tried to argue that Little was a calculating criminal, hell-bent on escape, lured the jailer into her cell with the promise of sexual favors. During the trial, Joan did testify. The defense declined to ask Joan to describe the events of the evening, like what exactly had went down.
Right.
They didn't make her go into those details, but the prosecution, they definitely made her go into the details. When the prosecution asked questions about some of her previous felony arrests or the previous felony arrest, Joan invoked her Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Joan said, quote, "He said he had been nice to me and it was time that I be nice to him." She described details of the sexual assault, how Alligood had entered her cell, taking off her nightgown and groping her breasts, that he had put his hand between her legs. Then he sat on the bunk, her bunk. He told Joan to get on her knees. And at this point, he had his pants, like he wasn't wearing pants.
Oh my God.
Right. So he's like naked when this is happening.
Did he have like tearaway NBA pants or something?
Well, he'd take them off. He had taken them off and sits down on the bunk. He forces Joan to get on her knees, and she says the entire time he's holding the ice pick like at her face and head.
Oh, so
like just inches away from her face.
So this is how the ice pick got into her cell. He brought it with him
Hell,
to threaten her with it.
I just can't believe it.
It's almost like he was wanting to rape this
It's
poor
almost
woman.
like he's a fucking creep.
Yeah.
I mean, wow.
But that's way the
Don't you talk about a white man like that, you son of a bitch.
her being a mystical temptress that he could not deny or it had no.
It's her magical devil vagina.
Oh, yeah. Hey, I gotta say, vaginas are powerful, but I still don't think that. I think this is what really happened.
Well, yeah, you better think of an old vag, because that's how you got here, boy.
Oh, I think them. I think they're mystical.
You just popped right out of one
I just came out. I was like, "What's up?"
with your big head.
Yeah.
Joan said she was too scared to scream. Alligood had already told her that if she did scream, it would be her word against his, and that no one would believe her.
And if you're in Joan's position, why would you not believe that, given what you've grown up around and what you've seen happen to other people and the stories you've heard?
Joan's testimony drew on experiences that Black women faced in the Jim Crow South, which had a history of racialized sexual terror against Black women. Chief Prosecutor William Griffin asked Little if she had sexually transmitted diseases and if she had participated in a prostitution ring operating at the Marine base. It was in an effort to convince the jury that Joan had seduced Alligood. Griffin kept insisting that Joan use explicit and vulgar language to describe the assault, even after she said she felt uncomfortable and embarrassed using certain phrases.
So the defense was attempting not to re-traumatize her on the stand, I would imagine.
Right.
That's why they didn't have her go into grave detail
Right.
of the assault. And, of course, the prosecution is not going to pass up a chance to re-traumatize this woman because the whole system has it out for women. They still do. They still do in 2024. The whole system hates women. And it's a Black woman on top of that. So there's
I'll
two
just give an
strikes.
example because I'm very crude and I don't care to say it. Like one example is Joan was like, he told me he wanted me to give him some sex. And the prosecutor was like, but that's not exactly what he said, right? Say what he said. And she was like, it makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't want to say that. But he was trying to get her to say, you're going to give me some pussy. And she was like, I don't feel comfortable using that word.
See,
That makes me feel embarrassed. But this prosecutor was like nailing her on the stand, like forcing her to say this word that she's saying, it makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't want to say that.
I just don't know who can watch this.
I mean, it's in an effort to further degrade her.
No, I understand.
And humiliate her.
And the fact is
it's disgusting.
That can land with this jury of white chauvinistic men and be okay in their eyes. For him to act like this in front of a jury is the most disturbing part of it because he knows it's going to work.
Well, in the end, Dylan, the prosecution appeared to be belligerent and crude. The hypocrisy of the prosecutors was their notion that Joan could kill for vengeance, but not for self-defense. Joan recounted how Alligood began harassing her 2 to 3 weeks after she arrived at the jail, and that's when he began asking for sexual favors. She denied him each time. Joan noted that she had written a journal of sorts in the margins of books she kept in the cell, mostly marking out her daily activities. And this is true, Dylan. She had kept like little journals. They found them just in the margins of books where she had dated and just written a little bit about her day. But she had written about Alligood's sexual advances. When the books were examined, one of the books had pages 6 through 78 missing. These were the pages that Joan claims discussed Alligood and the dates that he had harassed her and asked for sexual favors. And those were just missing. So it was clear to the defense that those pages had been tampered with, likely by law enforcement.
Well, yeah, why would Joan get rid of it? Because it actually supports her story.
Joan also stated that she had confided to her mother, Jessie Williams, about Olaga's advances. And while Joan was on the lam, Jessie did speak with a reporter saying, quote, jail personnel had been bothering her. 3 former Black women who were inmates at Beaufort County Jail gave sworn statements. These are women who had previously been jailed there. They each stated that Clarence Oligood had groped and fondled them without consent. He had also tried engaging in sex with these women. Phyllis Moore, a woman who had been incarcerated in July of 1974, along with Joan in the Beaufort County Jail, she was there for a short period, recalled Oligood asking Joan often, "Do you need a man?"
So disgusting.
The women also said Oligood brought items into the cell instead of simply passing them through the door.
Yeah.
And he would do little things, like it was said that he would bring Joan food like late at night. But all of these women said he would be really nice and do these kind of extra things, let you use the phone and stuff. But then afterwards would be like, well, now you owe me something.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's initiating this unnecessary contact.
Yes.
With the inmates, not just Joan, other women. It seems like any woman came around him probably was in danger. Let's be honest.
Joan testified that the ice pick was making her nervous because Oligood was holding it so close to her head at the time he was demanding oral sex. At some point, Joan said he dropped the ice pick on the floor. When he did, that's when she scrambled to pick it up, and a struggle ensued. Joan said she reached over her right shoulder and just began stabbing Oligood. She didn't know how many times. When she was able to break free, he was bleeding. She said there was blood all over the floor and that he was asking, "What the hell did you do?"
Yeah.
That's when Joan grabbed her only pair of clothes, which was jeans and a shirt. She closed the doors, taking the cell doors, and she took the keys with her. Once she was in the parking lot, she saw headlights, which startled her, and she took off running, throwing the keys down in the parking lot. She said, quote, "It was not my intention for him to stay there and die." One of Joan's attorneys, Jerry Paul, had been prepared for the prosecution's attacks on Joan's character. Paul said in the months leading up to the trial, he overheard the working class men of Washington brag about, quote, how they'd gotten some pussy the night before. And the question would always come up, black or white. Someone would say, "I picked up a slur walking down the road," and laugh. Sex, whether consensual or non-consensual, was another way for these white men of Beaufort County to assert physical dominance over the Black community. Paul said, quote, "The white and Black women are both sexual objects, but in different ways. The Black women are not regarded as human. She's somewhere between animal and human."
But you still want to have sex with it, even if you think that? Like, what the fuck's wrong with you, dude? To dehumanize you. Well, we know why they're dehumanized. It's so you can do atrocious things to them and not feel bad about it. I mean, that's been used. That's old as mankind itself, that theory. Dehumanize first, then you can do whatever you want and not feel bad about it. But see, that shows you that it wasn't just Black women. It was women in general.
Yeah, they regarded women the same, but they just felt like Black women, it was like just a little less than a white woman. But
yeah,
they treated both like shit.
No, it's like the sharecropper living next to the slaves' quarters. Is the sharecropper a free man, technically? Yeah. But is he given much more respect than the slave next door? Probably not. And that doesn't mean they're going through the same thing. It's just showing how there's different layers, but you can still be in the same group as far as the way you're treated.
The way you're viewed.
Or viewed by others or society in general.
Yeah. The 5-week trial, which began during the summer of 1975, ended with only a 78-minute deliberation. So they had a change of venue, Dylan, and the majority female jury, because they were able to get a new jury.
No way. They got heavy on the females.
Split evenly with Black and white women, and they acquitted Joan. All 12 jurors felt that Joan was vulnerable in the Beaufort County Jail.
Oh my gosh.
They all agreed that no sexual relationship between a jail employee and an inmate can be consensual. Joan Little's victory in the courtroom was an important step. It brought women of all races together. Not only did it further women's rights in this country, but also shone a light on the Jim Crow justice system that had put women like Little on trial in the first place. Yet it was a painful reminder that for Little's win there were hundreds of other cases that ended in defeat. Joan may not be a hero in the traditional sense, but I think her story is worth remembering and talking about.
Oh, it certainly is. I think it was a good story, and I mean, honestly, this is the first I've ever heard this story. So
I told you.
You were right. As far as I'm concerned, I'd never heard this story before, but I think Joan was just defending herself. And I believe her, honestly, even when she says she was just in the heat of the moment trying to get him off of her. She wasn't, calculating or picking where she stabbed him. And it all makes sense. I mean, it really makes sense, especially with a weapon or a tool like an ice pick. It makes deep puncture wounds. It's going to get veins, arteries. It's going to, get an organ or something. So, I mean, hey, if you hadn't come in there with your ice pick, I mean, honestly.
If you had been following protocol, like not entering the cell and not allowing the inmate out of the cell, I mean.
Or not carrying a weapon.
You probably, if you just stayed in your lane and done your job and been a professional, you probably wouldn't be dead, Clarence. Well, you probably would because your old ass is too old now, but he wouldn't have been murdered.
It wouldn't have died that night.
Nope.
That's what happens. When you rape.
You fuck around, you find out, right?
So the moral of this story is a rapist.
Don't be a piece of shit.
Got what they deserved.
Yeah.
That's what I'm taking away from it.
I'm not going to shed a tear for Clarence Alligood.
No, I'm not either.
I'm not going to be sad.
I'm not going to be sad. And I can't believe that they were able to get a change of venue and get, obviously it's going to make a new jury selection. And they got some females on there, a lot of females. And you know what? I think that, that they say that loosely, a jury of your peers. But I think it should almost always be exclusively people out of your income class, out of your working class. If you're working class, if you're upper class, your jurors should reflect that as well, because that's truly the people who understand where you're coming from and they understand your perspective. And I think that is very important when you're trying to decide a trial.
Well, Dylan, despite the fact that Joan was somewhat of like a cause célèbre in the 70s, she faded from the spotlight and went on to sort of just live her normal life in obscurity. And I couldn't find a lot of information, but I did find an article where a journalist said she was living somewhere in New York.
She's living La Vida Loca.
So she went on to live her life out of the spotlight and didn't seem to have any trouble after this.
Well,
so
imagine that.
So good for Joan.
Well, I'm sorry that she had to go through that and got caught up in certainly a corrupt component of the system. And I think that was all.
Now she did have that 7 to 10 year sentence for the larceny or the breaking and entering charge. She did serve some time for that, but eventually that sentence was overturned and she was let out of prison because it was a harsh sentence for a first-time offender.
It was, well, yeah, that 7, even if you do that 7, you got another 7-year sentence behind that, not even running concurrently. So the threat of another 7 years, so 14 years.
Well, the second sentence had been suspended in lieu of 5 years probation.
But I'm saying,
remember?
But it's still a threat.
Right.
And
but I'm just saying, so she did eventually,
right.
She was released and she didn't have to serve that sentence.
Well, yeah, but they would just use that as a stick to,
right,
hold you down more for another 5 years, always threatening another 7 years. Yeah, it was way too much. And I don't think that punishment fit the crime. Again,
not at all.
I don't like a thief. But that certainly, we've seen murderers, molesters, rapists get less than that.
But we also don't exactly know how much of a role Joan played into that because her brother had the stolen items.
We don't.
He's blaming
even
her.
If she was a full-on participant.
Her boyfriend is, yeah. So, I mean, we really don't know how much she participated in that. But anyway.
Yeah, even if she was the mastermind of the ring.
She didn't deserve to go to jail and be attacked by some creep.
No, she never deserved that, honestly. Short of murdering, molesting, all that. raping, you don't deserve to be treated like that once you go to jail.
Well, Dylan, that has been the case of Joan Little. Her name also is spelled like Joanne, but she went by Joan.
Okay.
So if people see her name, I haven't misspelled it or mispronounced it. It's how she spells her name, Joan.
Well, that was an important story that happened when a lot of big things were happening in our society, in our country. And I think it's very important to tell these stories because in our Discord fam, James pointed out today, I can't remember what case it was, but it's another case of a young missing girl who's not white, and they're just not talking about it. And he's just like, why? And I don't get it. It still happens. There's still.
Well, no, we've discussed Marissa Carmichael, who's missing from Greensboro, North Carolina. She's been missing for almost 2 months, and there's barely any news about her, and it doesn't seem like they are trying to find her at all.
Okay, that was the case I think James was referring to.
And it's really sad.
It is. It is. Everyone deserves
Advocacy.
And that, because you know what? You know what's not racist or cut along racial lines? Our fucking tax dollars, folks. And that is funding every dime of all of this. The working class.
Absolutely, Dylan. Preach it, brother.
I'm going to go and tell them. Now, thank you for that, Heather. And once again, we are hanging out in Old Chapel Hill for the minute and having a great time. We're heading off into spring. And we certainly hope this podcast finds you healthy. See, I don't even remember what I said.
Well, just stop because
Fed.
I was going to mention that my resources for today's case, mostly old newspaper articles.
A lot of them.
Yeah, I read through many a newspaper article to get today's story out for you.
Well, we appreciate that. You was down deep in the vault with this one.
Okay, Dylan.
All right.
We'll see you in a couple of days when we discuss true crime.
I'll see you in the middle of the week.
Bye.
Bye.